Hello, my dear viewers. This amazing story will be very instructive for you. It is very interesting and beautiful. I wish you enjoy watching it. Many young people who live in the village dream of moving to the city. They go to school and do everything they can to get out of the backwoods. Elizabeth, let's go. I made pancakes, always said in the morning in her gentle voice. Mom came up to her daughter and kissed her. Oh, Mom. Can I sleep a little more? Today is a day off. I don't need to go anywhere. She said in a sleepy voice and didn't open her eyes, trying to sleep some more. Come on, eat while they're hot, and then you can go back to sleep, the woman begged her. Ginny always got up early in the morning because there was a big household to take care of. After her husband died, she and her daughter were left alone. They knew everyone in the village. They had a big good house in the same household. All right, the girl got out of bed and went to the kitchen. She was very sleepy. The pancakes were really delicious, especially with melted butter. How was it? Even though Ginny knew what Elizabeth would answer her now, she always asked that. Mom, you're on top of things as always, her daughter would tell her. After that, she would have a mug of tea and go back to her room. But, of course, there was no more shaved sleep, so the girl would pack up and go out into the yard to help the woman. And no, she did not do it from under a stick. No one forced her to do anything. She just liked to do it. My little ones. She'd go to the piglets. Recently the pig had brought a litter, and now there was a joyful grunting in the pigsty. Stop pampering them. Feed them, clean them, and come out, Ginny told her. Look how cute they are, Mom. Elizabeth squeezed them. In response, the woman only smiled. She saw that her daughter was accustomed to the household and did not even worry that if she was left alone with this good, everything would be fine. After they were done, they had to draw water for the bath. The woman and the girl always stoked it on Saturdays, and then, having washed themselves, sat together in the kitchen and drank linden tea, talking about various things. At school, the girls studied not to say that. Well, there were also C's, but it did not upset anyone. All this in Elizabeth's life continued without incident until the girl was 14 years old. That year, a young boy from the city came to their village. He had just graduated and got a job at their club as a DJ. Before, when Uncle Bake, the local watchman, used to play music at discos, not many people went there. But now, when a young, mischievous guy arrived who not only played music, he did it with knowledge. He could mix, he could put on custom songs, and he could see when to put on a fast song, and he could see when to put on a slow song. I can't wait for Friday, her friend Olivia told Elizabeth at school. I guess you're not the only one looking forward to it, she smiled. Now, with the arrival of the new rabobabri on Friday and Saturday, young people could not be caught at home. All were either inside the club or near it. The girls were dancing. The boys were mostly sitting on the chairs, but sometimes they came out in a circle. And when there was a slow song, there was no place to fall in the hall. Everything was in couples. After school, I will definitely go to the city, Olivia told Elizabeth, when they went home after the disco. What to do there in this city? The girl did not understand. Yes. How is it? What? So many prospects you do not understand. Shook her head friend. What is not understandable? Look how beautiful it is here, fresh air, river, forest, on table, all their own, jam, pickles, meat. What else do you need to live? No one could persuade Elizaveta that she had to go to the city after school. Well, what about her studies? Olivia told her. What about school? The girl would shut up. Yes, she thought about it, but this question was on the last place, because if she was going to stay in the village, it was possible to work here without any education. But on the other hand, Elizaveta also realized that if she got even a secondary education in any profession, she would have a better chance. Come on, Elizabeth. The years of study will pass. Everyone will go. And you will pull, Olivia did not doubt it. They were going home. Elizabeth saw that the lights were on in the window, so her mother was waiting for her. "Why aren't you asleep?" She came home. "Waiting for you, worried." This dialogue was always the same. "You know that I was in the club, and I will not go anywhere further than that," said Elizabeth. Herself at this moment was washing makeup. "Oh, who knows you young people?" Ginny got up, went to the stove, took off the kettle from there, poured tea into a cup. "I won't," said the daughter. "Good, then go to bed." Was fine with her mother. She calmly sat down by the window and drank the aromatic tea. The woman was very worried about her daughter, that she could make mistakes in life. But, at the same time, she never tried not to pry into her soul. And so, when the 9th grade came to an end and all the boys gathered in the city, Elizabeth, not to say that she wanted it very much, went to get an education. And the girl, along with the rest, went to enroll. As soon as they arrived, she and Olivia decided that they would attend the same college. "What if I don't get in?" Elizabeth told her. She didn't want to go where her friend wanted her to go. "What are you talking about? What if you don't get in?" She didn't understand. "You're the mega brain, and I'm who, with a C to AC, somehow got a certificate," smiled Elizabeth. She did not want to hide it from anyone, because she realized that everything depended only on her. If she had studied, she would have gotten the same grades as Olivia. But, strangely enough, both girls had gotten in, and now they were moving into the dormitory. They hadn't even been home once. Elizabeth grumbled. "Why are you all bickering home? You have not yet profited there," did not understand her friend. "I miss my mom, I miss my piglets," said the girl with nostalgia. "What piglets?" Her friend wrinkled her nose. From the first day, Olivia started spending all the money her parents gave her, or she received a scholarship on different things. Naturally, she bought them at the market because she didn't have enough for other things. But still, she was fashionable. Studying was going on. Elizabeth was bored. "If you don't want to learn it, then why sit in the dorm? Come with us," Olivia told her. All the students, while it was warm, were outside. They gathered in groups, went to discos and clubs. "What if I don't want to?" Elizabeth told her. "Well, you don't want to, so you will. Where are you going to look for a guy?" asked her friend. "You know, as smart people say, happiness will find you on the stove," she answered Olivia. "Well, first of all, we have no stove here. And secondly, water does not flow under the lying stone," she parried. All right. I know you're smart," Elizabeth laughed to placate her friend. The day she'd met Austin right after school, Olivia had dragged her shopping. "You're not going to buy anything there anyway." Elizabeth didn't want to do that. It was her least favorite thing to do. "What difference does it make? Let's just go and look," she pulled her. And Elizabeth had to follow her friend, listening to what she chirped about fashion and other things. It was so painful. After the hardest shopping trip, Elizabeth was so tired she wanted nothing more than to just go to her dorm, lie on her bed, and fall asleep. But Olivia didn't think so. "So, let's go to the cafe and have some tea or coffee," she told the girl. "Let's go to the dorm. We have tea and coffee there," Elizabeth said in a tired voice. "Shit, you're so boring." Olivia looked away from her. Okay, let's go," Elizabeth said forcefully. They went into the cafe and ordered. When they were sitting at the table, they were brought tea. They did not order anything for it because they had no money at all. At some point, a young guy came up to them. "Hi, girls," he said. "Hi," Olivia perked up. "Why are you sitting with just tea?" He looked at their table. "Just thought we'd come in for a hot drink. What can't we do?" Olivia spoke and Elizabeth turned away to the window, silent the whole time. "I'm Austin," he told them cheerfully. "I'm Olivia, and this is my friend Elizabeth," the girl answered for everyone. "Can I join you?" he asked casually. "Sit down," Olivia shrugged, and Austin sat down next to Elizabeth. He went to the counter and got himself some tea and some desserts. "Here, my treat," he said, realizing that they were students and those were always short on money. The girls saw that the guy was a few years older than them, but it didn't make any difference. Olivia sat and tried her best to please the young man, but he paid no attention to her. "Why is your friend so quiet?" he told her. "Ask her." Olivia realized she had nothing to catch here. "No problem," he smiled and turned to Elizabeth. "You don't have to ask me anything. If you want to talk. But I just want to be quiet," she said. "Oh, how impertinent we are." The boy laughed again. "Olivia, enough tea. Let's go home." The girl got up from the table and headed for the exit. Austin took another sip and followed them. "Wait!" he shouted to them. All the way, he and Olivia chirped about something. Elizabeth walked on, thinking that she would never listen to her friend again and would never go anywhere with her. When they were already at the entrance to the dormitory, Austin took her hand. "Come on, let go of me." She looked at him. "Okay, I get it. I'll leave you two alone," Olivia said, and went inside. "Elizabeth, I'd like to get to know you better," Austin told her. "I don't." She wanted to take her hand away and follow her friend. "Why are you like this? Look how cheerful your friend is." He didn't understand. As it is, she managed to pull her hand out of his, and she left. As they say, forbidden fruit is sweet. And from that moment, Austin began to come to the dorm, and almost every day he called Elizabeth, sometimes asking Olivia to help. The guy had nothing, so he had little to offer, but he still made some surprises, gifts. "Elizabeth, look at the guy who's courting you. What more do you want?" Olivia said to her in the room. "Yes, I already see." Was not very standard, her answer this time. "Yeah, so you're okay with it?" "I don't know. At first I was blowing him off, but now I'm kind of ashamed," she said. "There is nothing shameful tomorrow. When he comes, you go for a walk together there and talk." Spoke like a teacher roommate. "All right," agreed Elizaveta. She had long thought of Austin not as an annoying young man, but as someone who had a backbone and wouldn't back down from what he set out to accomplish. Elizabeth had no idea, the first time she went on a serious date with Austin, that she would have a very different life for the next few years. "Elizabeth, I rented an apartment. Now we will live together," he told her. When the girls came to the second year of study, "That is, for 2 months you did not answer me, did not call, did not do anything, and now you say that you rented an apartment for us." She looked at him resentfully. The girl already thought that they had broken up a long time ago, when she went on vacation to the village. He'd promised to come, then to call, but he never did. "Come on, I have my own life here. Friends, worries." He began to mutter something under his nose. "Concerns," she grinned. But just like last time, Austin didn't let it go. He pursued the girl again, and at some point she gave in again. "So, are you moving in or not?" Olivia kept asking her. "We are?" Elizabeth answered nervously. "That's good, Elizabeth. I never thought you'd start living an adult life with a guy before me." Her friend came up to her and hugged her. "Come on. It remains to be seen whether we will live together or not." Elizabeth thought about it too. And now she and Austin were in a separate apartment. If you compare it with the dormitory, now you can do everything, not to run to the dormitory by 11, not to be afraid of the janitor or something else. "Let's go, I'll introduce you to my friends," a young man once told her. "Okay," she answered him. And from that moment on, Elizabeth's life began to change. They drove up to some country house, where a large company gathered. Austin talked to everyone very well. It was obvious that he was not the last person here. The party was going great. Elizabeth didn't even expect to enjoy it so much. "So, how did you like adulthood?" Austin asked her one day. "And what is the difference between adulthood and childhood?" She laughed in response. The girl was different now. If Olivia had seen her, she wouldn't have recognized her. Elizabeth had stopped talking to her for some reason. She began to be friends with Dimitri's company, and now every weekend either they went to their new friends or they were visiting them. At first Olivia would call and take offense, and then she stopped doing that too. Elizabeth didn't seem to care either. Austin was doing something. He had money, so the girl was very well with him. She rarely saw her mother now, and sometimes she could call her during the week, but somehow she was not up to it all the time. Shallow life so tightened that Elizabeth already did not remember how she lived without it and did not go anywhere. Hello, everyone. They came to the very country house where she had first met young men and girls. Elizabeth, come in. Her friends were already waiting for her. So, little by little, Austin began to linger somewhere in the company. He came home drunk more and more often. Elizabeth resented him because she had dropped out of school. Now she was sitting at home, doing nothing. Why not take her with him, or let her go with the girls? The young man was getting angrier and angrier every time she started lecturing him. He could drink at home lately, too. Elizabeth did not even think that in 2 years a person could change dramatically. Give me something to eat. He'd come home drunk again. You're the one who needs to cook, she snapped at him. What did you just say? He didn't understand what he heard. She didn't want to talk to him and went to her room. Austin jumped up from his seat, running after her. The girl didn't expect him to hit her, but apparently Austin didn't think so. Did you get it? He glared at her. You what? She held her face, her cheek burning from the slap. You'll know how to be rude to me. He turned around and left for the kitchen, there to continue his fun. The next day, when he left, that's when Elizabeth remembered both about Olivia and her mother. She wanted to complain to someone now, but whichever of her new friends she called, they all had something to do. She dialed Jeannie's number. Daughter, hello? She heard on the phone. Elizabeth cried because she realized that no matter how she felt about her mother, she would always accept and understand her. Mom, he hit me. The girl cried into the phone. Come on, pack your things and run away from him, the woman said. Maybe wait and see. After all, he was not himself. Elizabeth doubted it. She realized that she had to live somewhere, and she didn't work. She didn't study. The money was only Austin's. Well, I don't know what you want to accomplish with this. Her mother was against her staying with this young man. While they were talking, the girl heard keys being inserted into the keyhole. She quickly said goodbye and went into the kitchen. Today she put the meat in to make broth. She wanted to make borscht for Austin. See, she understood, and she said, don't. She could see he was out of sorts again. Austin, have you been up all morning? She didn't understand. Get away from me, he shouted. Elizabeth did not argue with him, went to the kitchen. There she peeled vegetables, fried, boiled, and at this moment cried how her life could turn 180 degrees. For a week or two, everything was fine. Elizabeth had been meaning to call Olivia for a long time, to ask her how she was doing, since it had been so long since they had seen each other, and now she dared dialing her number. What? You want to make up? She asked her. We have not quarreled with you, Elizabeth told her. If you want, come. We are now in a cafe, just and sit together, said her childhood friend. Everyone wait. I will definitely come. She did not call Austin, but wrote him a message that she went to meet her friend. She didn't think he would say or do anything. Olivia, hi. She walked into the cafe. The girlfriends hugged. They walked to a table, sat down. The girl introduced Elizabeth to the others, and she didn't care where and with whom she was sitting now. The main thing was to distract herself from what was happening in her family. Well, I hope we will not lose contact with you now, said her friend. No, of course not. Elizabeth was sure of it. They sat until closing time and then went home. Elizabeth entered the apartment. She did not expect it, but immediately received a blow to the face. The girl realized that it was useless to say anything. Elizabeth tried to somehow get into the bedroom so that Austin would not touch her again. Where to? He grabbed her by the hair. He was in such a state today that he could barely stay on his feet. Let go. She tried to break free of him, thinking that since he was like this, she would be able to overpower him. Let go. Yes, please. He pushed her. She fell to the floor. What are you doing? Stop it. She couldn't get up. Stop. Austin stood over her. When did you become like this? She sobbed. Where have you been? He kicked her with each word. The girl only had time to cover her face with her hands so he wouldn't hit her there. How she screamed that night was impossible, and her roommate didn't care about that scream. He did not stop in his torture until Elizabeth became quiet and stopped moving. After that, he went into the kitchen, drank some more, and then went into the room, flopped down on the sofa, and snored. In the morning, as if nothing had happened, Austin got up, went into the kitchen. Everything was on the table. All he had to do was splash himself into a glass and drink. As he tilted the glass and the liquid burned his lips, he noticed out of the corner of his eye that one wall had been smeared with something red. He set the glass aside, turned around. Elizabeth, as she had been on the floor yesterday, was still there. He went over to her. Elizabeth, 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 Elizabeth. He beat her on the cheeks, but the girl was unconscious. The young man ran to the phone, called an ambulance, and when he called the address, he remembered that yesterday he had brought her to such a state. He sat down, cried, then went to the kitchen. There it was, all poured in the glass, just as he'd left it there. But that wouldn't help him now. He took the bottle, tilted it, and drank straight from the neck to the bottom. When he heard the ambulance siren wailing under the window, he went into his room, took out his gun, looked at Elizaveta one last time, and pulled the trigger. The doctors who had arrived at the entrance when they came up saw that the doors to the apartment were open. They rushed in and saw first a young man lying in the middle of the corridor, and then the girl. She had a pulse, so they quickly loaded her and took her to the hospital. They left Austin to be dealt with by law enforcement, who were called in. Where am I? Elizabeth opened her eyes and saw a white ceiling above her. The girl, who was standing near the IV, quickly ran into the corridor and called the doctor. Already in a few minutes, the doctor came into her. He touched her pulse, shone a flashlight into her eyes. How are you doing? He asked her. Where am I? Elizabeth repeated her question. You're in the hospital. We found you in the apartment. You were unconscious. He began to tell her. And Austin? She didn't know why she was interested. Your roommate shot himself. The doctor didn't hide anything from her. Tears came out of her eyes. He may have done that to her, but she had once loved him and he had loved her. That's it. Stay, you can't move, you have tissue damage, the doctor told her and left the room. The nurse came over, adjusted the pillow, smiled at Elizabeth. I congratulate you, she said to her. For what? She didn't understand. You don't know how strong your body is to have taken so many blows, to be unconscious for so long, but not to lose the baby, she told her. What baby? Elizabeth was shocked. Like which one? Yours? The girl in the white coat smiled. I don't believe it. She leaned back on the pillow, looked at the ceiling, and in her head there were such processes that could not be expressed in words. Do you want to get rid of the baby? The nurse asked her. I think it should not concern you, Elizabeth answered her politely. What are you doing? Look how he was clinging to life, and you want to kill him. The smile disappeared from the hospital worker's face. She left the room. Elizabeth was alone there. She saw her phone lying on the nightstand. She picked it up and called her mom. Mommy. She didn't even say hello to her. She started talking right away. Elizabeth, what's wrong? As if she sensed something was wrong with her daughter. Mom, I'm in the hospital, she told her. It's come to this, the woman said sadly. Mom, it doesn't matter now. Come, I'm expecting a child, the daughter told her. So daughter, let's not do anything stupid. Wait, I'll be there soon. Don't do anything without me. Ginny was afraid that Elizabeth would do something stupid. As the woman promised, she came. Day and night she sat in her daughter's room. But the injuries were strong, but all quickly passed. And in 3 weeks, Elizabeth and her mother were discharged from the hospital. All that remained was a broken wrist and a small bruise on her face. We should get an apartment, Ginny said. Mom, maybe we could go to the country. Her daughter turned to her. Do you really want to do that? The woman wasn't sure. I really want to. And as you know, I didn't even want to leave there. If you all hadn't insisted, it wouldn't be happening now. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, of course, but the girls stopped talking. They went to the station, got on the bus, and went to their village. All this time, Elizabeth's mood was such that even words cannot describe. But when she crossed the threshold of her home, everything changed at once. Some nostalgia, tenderness, something so strong that Elizabeth turned to her mother. Forgive me, she told her. For what? The woman didn't understand. For everything, she rushed to Ginny, hugged her and cried, Don't cry. Everything will be fine. The baby will be born now. We'll raise it. We'll bring it up. Don't worry, her mother soothed her as always. Here, at home, Elizabeth's pregnancy went just fine. Fresh air helped, natural food. Nothing caused neither toxicosis nor fatigue. There was nothing. In due time, Elizabeth gave birth to a son, whom she named Semyon. So they decided together with her mother. When the girl came home after the maternity hospital, it became clear that now it will be much harder to live. The child needed a lot of things: clothes, diapers, swaddling clothes, diapers, and everything else. The mother was squeezing the last juices out of herself. She was doing a lot of things around the house, household chores, also had time to work. And now she decided that she had to sell chickens or pigs to make money. Ginny did what she could for her daughter. Elizabeth, I can't sell the last pig, she said to her daughter. Mommy, of course you can't. Christopher was almost 2 years old by this time. You could put him in daycare. What are we going to do? They sat down together at the table. Listen, if you agree, then stay here with Christopher. Let him go to kindergarten, and I'll go back to the city, find some work there anyway. The salary is higher than here. Elizabeth suggested to her, Daughter, you should be careful there somehow. Remembered her mother last time she went there. Mom, don't even remember, Elizabeth begged her. As hard as it was, the son had to be parted from her mother too. And so, Elizabeth went again to the same town where she had lived for several years. She had a little money and rented a room for the first time. She got a job wherever she could find one. She had no education, so she worked as a waitress, technician, dishwasher, wherever she was called. She went there as long as the money was paid. Once in the restaurant, after the shift, Elizabeth went outside, and while she was saying goodbye to the girls and was about to leave, she heard a familiar voice. She realized it was Olivia. It was embarrassing, but she couldn't help but talk to her friend. Olivia, hi. She saw them from a distance. Elizabeth. She stood there looking at her and couldn't believe they were seeing each other again. I didn't expect to see you here either, the girl told her. Are you resting? Olivia asked her. I'm working, as embarrassing as it was to realize. It was true. Come with us, Olivia asked her. Oh, you know, let's not today, we'll call later, and then we'll meet sometime. Elizabeth was exhausted. Come on, not today, they said goodbye. Elizabeth went home. Olivia back to the restaurant. And the very next day in the evening, Olivia called her childhood best friend. They agreed to meet tonight. It was in the park. It was chilly outside, but the girls didn't notice, because they were telling each other who lived where and how. Elizabeth didn't say much about herself because Olivia was always talking. It turned out that she had found a young man too. They were already preparing for the wedding, but just before the event, the girl found out that he was not faithful to her. That's how they split up, she said. Well, let's split up, and when I have a weekend, we'll meet again, Elizabeth offered her. I don't mind, Olivia smiled. And they hugged like they had when they were kids, said goodbye, and went home. Now they met almost every weekend when Elizabeth had time. They went to cafes and other places of entertainment. Olivia was always the initiator, and she dragged Elizabeth everywhere with her. I don't know how you'll do it, but we have to go to the club on Saturday, Olivia told her. I don't even know. Elizabeth wasn't a fan of skipping work. No way. Everyone will be there. Some famous artist is coming. We have to be there. Olivia looked at her with big eyes. Okay, I agree, replied Elizabeth. The next day, when she was at work, she talked to her bosses. They let her go without any problems because she never missed her shifts. And now, she was sitting at home in front of the mirror and didn't know what to wear. But she decided that there was nothing to think about. There were only a few outfits in the closet. Elizabeth, where are you? Olivia called her. I'm on my way, she answered the phone. They were supposed to meet at a friend's house to get ready. Since the girls' financial situation was unstable, they decided to have a few drinks and snacks at home so that they could come to the club prepared. So we have a couple of hours, and then we have to be at the club? Olivia looked at her watch. Oh, who do you want to meet at that club? Do you think there's anyone normal there? Elizabeth thought back to her past married life, and she didn't want that to happen again. Oh, come on. Olivia was hurt. And what? From your stories, I realized that no matter how many young men you met, everyone was either married or had some kind of problem, Elizabeth said to her in response. They called a cab, went outside, got into the car and drove to the club. The music was playing loudly there, which seemed to Elizabeth to be hitting her ears. Let's go straight to the bar, Elizabeth suggested, at which point Olivia gave her a look that made her friend uncomfortable. Wow. She shook her head. What's the big deal? We'll order cocktails. Why do we need a table? She didn't understand. Indeed, Olivia agreed with her now. They asked to make them cocktails and stood and watched what was happening in the hall. Young people were not only dancing, some of them were trying to show off in front of everyone, making some intricate moves. But it was the custom here that no one paid attention to anyone. Look, Olivia showed Elizabeth one of the young men. Yeah, she nodded, realizing who she meant. I want to meet him. Will you help me? Olivia began to fuss. She didn't know how, but she was sure that today she had to leave this place with this man. Well, of course, what should be done? Was ready for everything, friend. When the young man was near the counter itself, Olivia went on the attack. Push accidentally my glass so that it falls between us, she asked her friend. Okay, she agreed. And when the guy was very close, Olivia started to take the phone and elbowed her friend's glass. It fell on the bar. The liquid spilled. Naturally, the guy couldn't help but notice. Oh, forgive me, please, Olivia immediately told him. She came over, got some napkins, started wiping off the bar, and wanted to help him. No need, I'll do it myself, he told her. Again, excuse me, she looked at him with eyes that made him freeze for a second. Yeah, that's okay, he laughed at that point. My name is Olivia, she said. Mine's Alvin, he replied. Very nice. Though Olivia was near him, she realized he wasn't near her at all. Then she turned back to her friend. I had to speak very loudly and almost in her ear because the music was playing so loudly. I wish I had a handsome boy like that, she said to Elizabeth. Are you sure he's handsome? She laughed back. Are you blind? Olivia turned to Alvin again. At that moment, their gazes met because he was standing there looking at her. She immediately turned away and spoke quietly to Elizabeth to refuse to dance when she called for her. Then Olivia turned back to the bar, ordering another cocktail for herself. Can I pay for it? The young man perked up at that moment. Of course, the girl was doing everything she could to get his attention. Elizabeth, let's go dancing, she said. Oh, you know. Today, somehow not in the mood, the girl said naively. She only did what she did to hold back a smile. "Come dance with me," said the young man. "With pleasure," Olivia answered him, and they went to the dance floor. Her friend stood near the bar. She finished her cocktail, watched her dancing with the young man, and was happy for her that everything had turned out so well. She decided that if her friend didn't want to go home now, she would definitely head there. With that question in mind, she approached Olivia. "I'm leaving," she said. "Where to?" The girl was surprised. "Home. I have nothing to do here. You're having fun, and I can't have that kind of fun," Elizabeth told her honestly. "Well, all right." Olivia turned to Alvin, looking for approval in his gaze or words. "Why are you looking at me like that?" He smiled, at which point Elizabeth thought he was really cute. "You will walk me out, won't you?" she asked him. "Of course," he answered her. "That's it, then call a cab. Don't walk," Olivia asked Elizabeth. "I'll handle it myself." The girl turned around and headed for the exit. "Bye," shouted her friend after her. Elizabeth walked outside. It was nice out, and even though it was already night, she decided to walk. She walked along the almost deserted streets and thought about her life. Suddenly, the brakes squealed. The car stopped a few centimeters away from Elizabeth. She didn't even notice how she stepped out onto the roadway. "Are you sick of living?" Jumped out of the driver's seat and started yelling at the girl. "Sorry, I was thinking, and did not notice how I came out here." She stood and looked with frightened eyes at the young man. He walked around the car, looked to see if she was okay, then got back behind the wheel. Elizabeth turned around and walked out onto the sidewalk, shaking all over. She realized she could be on her way to the hospital right now. "Girl, excuse me." The same car pulled up beside her. "What?" She turned and looked at the driver. "I'm sorry," he said simply and smiled. "Ah, yes, it's all right," she went on, and he drove slowly beside her. "What a ride." He looked back and forth at the road, then at her. "No thanks, I'll walk." She didn't want to bother a stranger. "Wait." He stopped the car, ran out of the car, and approached her. "Again, I apologize." She didn't look at him. "Why are you always apologizing? I almost hit you." He smiled. "It's okay," she repeated for the umpteenth time. "Let's go." He nudged her lightly toward the car. Elizabeth didn't resist now. She gave in to his entreaties, even though she knew it was wrong to do so. Already when she was sitting in the car, she thought, what if it was all a setup? And he wanted to lure her that way, but it was too late. "Girl," she heard through her thoughts. "Oh, yes, what?" She turned around. "My name is John." He couldn't stop smiling. "Elizabeth," she too strained a smile. "Where are we going?" He looked at the road. Elizabeth gave the address. They reached the place quickly. They were silent the whole way. "Thank you." She got out of the car. "You're welcome, though." He got out after her. "What?" The girl didn't understand what he wanted from her. "Can you give me your phone number? Call me, meet me." He didn't insist. "I do not even know," embarrassed Elizabeth. "If you do not want to communicate, I will not pester," he promised. The girl herself did not know what attracted her to this young man, but she dictated to him her numbers. After she went home, she did not want anything, not even to think, just went to bed. When she was on shift the next day, her phone rang. An unfamiliar number was on the screen. Elizabeth quickly took off her gloves, answered it. "Hi, it's John," he said cheerfully. "I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable talking right now," she practically whispered. "Why?" He switched to a whisper as well. "At work," Elizabeth replied. "Tell me the address, and when you're free, I'll come over." He practically insisted today. It was easier for Elizabeth to say all that than to bicker and wait for someone to notice. In the evening, when she went out, the guy was already waiting for her. She walked over, got in the car. They drove off. The girl thought that he was about to start pestering her with questions about why she worked here and everything else, but John was silent. "Home." He turned around. "Yes." She nodded and looked embarrassed. Will we ever meet up again? John asked her. I don't know, she shrugged. When's your day off? He seemed to know everything. The day after tomorrow, she wouldn't lie, even though they didn't talk. She felt cozy with this man. Agreed. I'll call you tonight, and then I'll stop by again tomorrow to take her home. He took care of her. Thank you, like. And yesterday she got out of the car. Bye, see you tomorrow. He stayed behind the wheel today. Elizabeth walked into the house. If yesterday there were no oblique thoughts, today for some reason she thought about him, her new acquaintance. He is handsome, well-dressed, on an expensive car, and she, who, a simple dishwasher. Different thoughts were in her head. Elizabeth. Hi. On the morning of Elizabeth's day off, Olivia called her. How are you doing? She asked her because she knew her friend couldn't wait to tell her about her new acquaintance. Oh, you have no idea. I just came from Albany. Elizabeth felt her friend blush. So you're doing well. The girl hurried to finish the conversation because it was now John was supposed to call. Yeah, Olivia stopped talking. You're a little wordy, surprised her friend, because before Olivia could not shut her mouth. I wanted to get together, and I see you don't want to. The girlfriend took offense again. Let's do it some other time, Elizabeth asked. Okay, didn't say goodbye, and ended the conversation. Olivia. John didn't call until an hour later, saying he was waiting for her outside her house. Elizabeth was already ready. She walked down, got in the car. Hello. He looked at her. Hello. She was cheerful. She didn't know why. They drove around the city talking. John knew a lot of stories. Elizabeth at first only listened and then began to tell them herself. Sometimes he couldn't make it, but she didn't say anything about it. Elizabeth, why don't we move in together? The young man asked when they had been dating for 6 months. I don't know. Until now, Elizabeth couldn't figure out how to behave with this man. On the one hand, he looked presentable, all expensive and rich, but on the other hand, he talked about earthly things and what not to know. So we will be in the corners in your room. All right, give me some time and I'll decide, she asked. I'm in no hurry. He leaned over and kissed her cheek, more than Elizabeth would allow yet. Elizabeth was at home. It was her day off today, and Olivia called her at lunchtime. He left me, she wailed into the phone. What are you talking about? She couldn't believe it could happen. They had such a good relationship. Can I come over? Asked the girl. Of course, there simply could not be any other answer. Elizabeth dialed John's number. She told him everything. Then I will come too. You have long promised to introduce us, said the young man. Great. She smiled, she thought. Not every man would come when two girlfriends get together, especially on such an occasion. Olivia arrived quickly. She had brought wine with her. They sat down at the table, filled their glasses. Who's this for? Olivia noticed the third glass. Friend is coming to see me now. Elizabeth did not hide it. Wow. Olivia seemed to have forgotten about her grief. Well, tell me about it. Elizabeth wanted to get her back on track with what she'd come in with. That's it. Alvin is a scoundrel. She made a cross with her hands. It's a normal story, but it's informative, laughed the landlady. She was already smiling and raising a glass to Elizabeth's happiness. There was a knock on the door. Elizabeth stood up, opened it, and John appeared on the doorstep. Meet him. She introduced her friend and the young man. Elizabeth, let's go to the kitchen. The slicing seems to be over, Olivia called out to her. What are you doing? Her friend pulled her back when they were in the kitchen. What's wrong with you? Where did you get such a guy? You don't go anywhere. She looked at her with big eyes. Accidentally met. He almost hit me. Elizabeth did not hide anything. Lucky you, Elizabeth, said her friend. Come on, don't be jealous. Elizabeth chopped up everything they needed. They went back to the room. Girls, where have you been so long? John said to them. We still had time to talk. Olivia came to complain to me today. But the story didn't work out for some reason. Elizabeth smiled. They sat at the table, drinking wine, talking, laughing. John, as usual, talked a lot. joked, the girls laughed. All right, I'll go. You two should probably stay alone. Olivia stood up and headed for the exit. Bye, nice talking to you, the young man told her as they stood in the hallway. Olivia looked at Elizabeth and started to whisper, not wanting anyone to hear her. Why aren't you two still living together if you've been dating for so long? She looked up at her. We haven't really kissed yet. And you're saying why you don't live together? Elizabeth didn't want to say that John had suggested it to her. Come on, kiss. Don't miss the chance, as if Olivia was giving her advice. However, it was as usual. Okay, girlfriend. That's it, while we figure out for ourselves whether we should move in together or not. Elizabeth opened the door for her and almost pushed her out the door. She came back into the room, sat down next to John. She's a funny friend, he told her. Yeah, but she thinks about the wrong things all the time. You know how she studied at school, almost with a gold medal, and then all thoughts switched to clothes and grooms. The girl shared with him. So what? Have you thought about living together? Again returned to this topic guy. Are you sure you want it? Elizabeth, even this question was ashamed to ask. I don't understand. What's the problem? He asked her. Well, you have an expensive car suit job, probably the same apartment. You can think of me that I'm with you only because of this. She began to tell him the truth, which he has long thought about. Despite the fact that I have a car, a job and clothes, I live in a rented apartment, he muttered, and I invite you there. At that moment, Elizabeth didn't know what to say, so many thoughts immediately appeared in her head. Why does he live in rented accommodation? What? He doesn't have enough money. If he can afford such a car, could buy an apartment, at least take a loan, but decided to keep silent and say nothing. All right, she answered. They talked about something else. Elizabeth translated the conversation, and when the young man left, she immediately dialed Olivia. Have you seen the time, friend? She asked her. Listen, Olivia. Today you asked why we are still not together, he proposes, but with all his glamour, for some reason lives in a rented apartment and calls me to live there. Elizabeth shared with her. You know, most likely he is married. Made an assumption, friend. Why do you think so? Elizabeth did not understand the connection between a rented apartment and a wife. Well, as a man with status, has a wife, maybe even children, and you call you to live in a rented apartment. It is clear that he has a house or living space in the property, and in order not to offend you, and do not go to you in the communal room, so he offers to move to him unrented, she reasoned. Elizabeth had enough of this one conversation with her friend to get these thoughts into her head. She had a shift the next day and the day after that too, so they didn't see John. Elizabeth, however, had a head full of various thoughts about him. They met when she had another day off. John, I don't want there to be any misunderstandings between us. Let's clear things up here and now. She got into the car and didn't even say a word of greeting to him. Okay, talk. I don't have any secrets from you. He didn't look her in the eyes for some reason. Tell me, why are you asking me to live in a rented place? She asked him a question, and immediately felt her cheeks start to blush. I don't understand. What kind of question? He furrowed his brow. Your car is worth as much as 2 apartments in the city. Why couldn't you buy an apartment and chose a car? She started from afar. What's the connection? Just like Elizabeth asked Olivia that once. Okay, I won't beat around the bush. Are you married? She asked him a direct question. What? He laughed. I don't see what's so funny. She looked him in the eye. Elizabeth, how could I meet you so often? How many evenings we spent together, he told her. Let's go to your place, she said, and buckled her seatbelt. Let's go. He didn't mind. Elizabeth thought now, if they arrive, she will definitely see everything, whether it is his apartment or he rented it on purpose, and generally understand everything. When they entered the apartment, she saw a framed picture of John with an older woman. It was clear that it was a relative, either his mom or his aunt. Things stacked up in the closet. There were some little things lying around here and there. Well, he couldn't have done all this on purpose, because he didn't know she was going to visit him today. Elizabeth went to the kitchen, looked where the kettle was, poured water, put it on to boil. She sat down at the table. "Tell me, do you really have any feelings for me?" The young man asked her. "Why are you asking me this question? Don't you know?" She looked at him. Today he was somehow different. If usually he smiled, laughed, joked, today he sat in front of her very serious. "Okay, I'm going to tell you one thing now because of which you just might leave me." He stood up and started walking around the kitchen. "If you're not married, nothing else can stop me," she said. "No, I am definitely not married. You can check my passport. Any other documents, and my friends will prove it to you if you start talking to them," he said seriously. "Then what?" She couldn't understand. "In fact, I do not have an Oberkoi car, Oberkoi clothes, and in general, nothing." Now he looked into her eyes, and she realized that the guy was telling the truth. But how could it be, after all she sees all this, and has been driving this car for months now? Talking to him, how could that be possible? She was waiting for a detailed explanation now, because she was afraid that her previous history with Austin might repeat itself. "Don't think anything of it. I haven't stolen anything. I haven't cheated anyone. If only a little," John said. "Well, please don't be long. Tell me everything at once, and then everything will fall into place," she asked him. "Well, listen, I'm an ordinary guy who came from a village, went to college, and then went to work. First, I was a security guard at a paid parking lot, and then I helped a man who turned out to be the head of a car dealership. He asked me to work there," John said, while Elizabeth was pouring tea. "Are you sure you didn't steal that car?" She laughed. "Definitely not stolen. In the evenings, when the shift ends, I work part-time in the car service, and our boss during the day races on this car, and in the evening leaves it there because he goes with the driver," John explained to her. "Well, now at least something is clear," Elizabeth said. "Are you going to talk to me after all this?" he asked her. "Of course I will." She put her arms around him and started kissing him. Tonight they had a fabulous night, and in the morning Elizabeth told him that she would move all her things to his place in the evening. Listen, they sat the next day in the common kitchen because the girl was already a resident of this apartment too. Yeah, he was ready to hear her out. "Do you think I would work in a restaurant as a dishwasher, waitress, or something else if my life was good?" The smile did not leave her face. "What then?" That's what he wanted to hear. "Well, just like you, different problems right now." She didn't want to tell him about Christopher because she didn't know how he would feel about it. "Listen, I have an idea," John told her. "I'm listening," she answered him. "Why don't we go and live in the country?" After she had told him how much she liked it there and everything else, he couldn't offer her anything else. "What would we live on?" she asked. "I'll get a job, you too, even if it's not much. But money, household. It's your own. There's enough for everything," he assured her. "I'd love to, but let's stay here a little longer. Earn some money, save up, at least for the first time, and then we'll go," she agreed. "Only you'll have to live with my mother." He smiled and looked at her. "Is that a condition?" she asked. No, and not even a question. He didn't know what to say, and she laughed at that moment. "Is she your normal?" Elizabeth had heard a lot about mothers-in-law, but had never encountered it herself. "She's a very kind woman. You'll definitely get along. And she has a huge house in the village, so there is enough room for everyone, and there will still be." He began to describe the place where he grew up. "John, how do you feel about children?" the girl asked him. "Aubrey," he answered her. "You mean you don't want kids?" She clarified her question. "You understand, now is such a time that a child is not enough to give birth. It must be brought up, raise, learn, and whether we can do it or not, I do not know, so why breed poverty?" He took a sip of tea, stood up, and went into the room, thereby showing Elizabeth that he finished the conversation. The girl understood everything. It was hurtful. But there was nothing she could do about it. Now they were both working, no one was going anywhere in any expensive cars. In the evening they came home either on foot or by some other means of transportation. They put aside everything they earned. They didn't need much. And in a year and a half they had accumulated a good amount of money, enough to live on for a few months, maybe even more. Well, I've already called my mom, said that we'll come to her, the young man told her. John, let's sign here, she asked him. I mean, like a fool. I bought a ring. I thought we'd come home, invite your mother, my mother, all together at the table. I'll get down on one knee, make you a proposal. You take this box, start jumping for joy. And here you yourself, John, let's get married, of course. He hugged her. Of course he hugged her. Of course he hugged her. Of course. Out the box and gave it to her. I don't want to be in the village. You'd have to get everyone together, get to know each other, socialize, and I'm not ready for that yet. Let's just sign. And if we have to, we'll have a wedding, she asked him. Of course. He agreed to everything. The very next day they went to the registry office, filed an application. The date was set in a few weeks. All this time they were still working. After, when they signed, they came home, happy, drank champagne. The next day they had to go to the village. Tosh, can I ask you something? They were lying in bed in the evening. Sure. Why do you keep asking it? He turned to her. Come on, you'll go to the village to your mom, and I'll go to mine. She was lying, looking at him and waiting for his reaction. Well, in principle, I don't mind, he told her and kissed her. Then, it is agreed. While you prepare your mother, you will do everything at home. We will also have time to see each other. And I will come to you after this arrangement. The young people quietly went to bed. Christopher ran Elizabeth along the path to the house and saw her son playing near the gate. Mommy, he turned to her. She had seen her son grow up. Even though Ginny had sent her pictures, she couldn't tell from them what she saw now. They entered the house, the mother setting the table as usual. She had been warned, so she was waiting for her daughter. They spent the whole day together, and after the boy was put to bed in the evening, Elizabeth came into the kitchen and sat down at the table. I see that a serious conversation is coming up, her mother told her. Yes, and you have no idea. What kind? Elizabeth took out of her pocket a wedding ring and put it on her finger. What is it? The woman didn't understand. I got married, her daughter told her. When? The mother waited for an answer. Yesterday. Elizabeth laughed, because the mother had a face like she was about to faint. Well, and who is he? The woman wondered. Mom, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. John and I met. I started to tell her their story and got to the present moment. Yeah. The woman was waiting for the rest of the story. You see, when I asked him what he thought about kids, he immediately, without even thinking, said he didn't want them. I'll be leaving in a week, and I want to leave Christopher with you for a while, she said, her eyes downcast, because she was ashamed of herself, both in front of her child and her mother. You'll come, won't you? Ginny asked her. Well, of course I will. There was no other answer. Go, my daughter. Set up your personal life, and then you will slowly tell him that you already have a child, and you cannot get away from it, said her mother, as usual. Elizabeth hugged her because her mother understood, knew, and supported her. The week passed very quickly. Elizabeth had no time at all to communicate with the child. She was leaving and crying. Mommy, why are you crying? She had her son in her arms. Christopher, we will have to part again, but you don't cry. Mommy will be here soon. She kissed him and couldn't stop. She drove from one man she loved to another. John met her, gave her flowers, took her to his home, where his childhood, youth, and everything else had passed. Mom, where are you? They came home. Here I am, a woman's voice was heard. Well, hello, Snowshy, she said to her as she came out. Hello, Emma. They walked into the kitchen, which was very large compared to what it had been in Elizabeth's parents' house, sat down at the table. There was some awkward silence at first. "Are you two just going to stare at each other?" John asked them. "Oh, no, we're just looking at each other." The woman said she didn't initially want her sister-in-law to think anything bad about her. "It's okay. I'm good to you too. And I don't want to quarrel or anything like that," the girl told her. They sat amicably at the table. Elizabeth really saw that John's mother is a good woman. The next morning, when the young man went to find out about the job, the girl got up early and prepared breakfast. "You are my clever girl," the woman came out to her. "Here I wanted to please you and show that your son is in good hands," smiled daughter-in-law. "Yes, I see. Everything is fine," Emma said good-naturedly. After they had breakfast, Elizabeth cleared the table, washed the dishes. They went out into the yard. "Will you show me what you have here and how?" the girl asked the woman. Of course, they went through the yard. Here, everything was a little different from what Elizabeth was used to. "Oh, and what is this?" She saw a stable. "What do you think?" smiled mother-in-law. "Are there horses in there?" Did not believe the girl. She had dreamed of these animals since childhood, but in their village they were only on the farm. "Yes, let's go." The woman was flattered that her daughter-in-law was so surprised. They went inside. There were only 4 horses. Elizabeth immediately approached one of them. "Careful, aren't you afraid?" Emma asked her. "Come on. How can you be afraid of them?" smiled Elizabeth. They spent a very long time here. In addition to the stable, there were other buildings, but mostly there were various birds. It was a woman's weakness. When the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law returned to the house, they began to cook together. The mother stood behind the stove, and the girl helped to peel vegetables. That's how it all worked out. "Come on." Emma rejoiced. She had never thought that there were such daughters-in-law. John came home. "So how was your day?" he asked. "Excellent, especially I liked one place." His wife told him how she had been given an excursion. "It makes me happy. And I got a job," he said. "Let's get on with our lives." Elizabeth stretched. Her husband did not keep her here long. She went to their room and went to bed. After a month of living here, Elizabeth got bored. "I'll go and see if there are any workers needed." She wanted to leave the house. What is there to find out? They are needed everywhere. All the young people have moved away. Hands are needed everywhere, the woman told her. "Where exactly?" turned all aloud the girl. "At the post office." Emma shrugged. "Thank you, did not wait," and Elizabeth immediately went there. And indeed, the local post office required a letter carrier. Yes, it's a thankless job, but it's not like being at home. "John, I'm working now too," she told her husband in the evening. "Good." He didn't say anything. He had dinner, and then he and his wife went into the bedroom. "Shall I bring tea?" Elizabeth asked him when it was late and it was time to go to bed. Yes, he was lying in bed. The girl went to the kitchen, did everything, then returned to the room. When John was asleep, Elizabeth got up and began to dress. She quietly left the room and went outside. There, no longer afraid of waking anyone, she headed for the stables. The place beckoned to her. She could not go there in the afternoon or in the morning, because she was working. Time passed. Life here seemed to Elizabeth like Groundhog Day. In the morning, everyone had breakfast. Then she and John went to work. She didn't know what her husband did during the day, but she ran around the village, delivering letters, telegrams, pensions. By evening, she was so tired that she fell off her feet, but Elizabeth knew almost all the people in the village. "How are you?" In the evening, her husband would ask her a duty question, and that was it. Then she would go to her room and go to sleep. The only outlet were the horses, with whom you could talk. Tell them everything Elizabeth thought about. "John, what's going on in our family? We haven't had much time together yet." One day she sat down to talk to him. "You know how tired I am," he complained to her. "And I am just as tired, but still have time to do a lot of things around the house, and your mom to help," said the girl. Give me time to get used to it, and everything will be as before." He kissed his wife. When Elizabeth went to work the next day, she saw a young girl standing on the porch of the post office. "Hello," she approached her. "Hello, are you Elizabeth?" she asked her. "Yes, everyone here knew her, so why the questions? I've heard so much about you, so I came to meet you," the girl said cheerfully. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Elizabeth looked at the clock. "What difference does it make? I'm running to the store. The bread at home is out." The stranger behaved cheerfully. "Well, is my name you know, and you?" Elizabeth asked her. Aubrey extended her hand to the girl. Pleased, they entered the post office building. Now Elizabeth had a girlfriend. They walked around in their free time, chatting. "John, let's go to the disco on Saturday," the wife said to her husband. "You what? What disco?" He was very surprised. "What's the big deal? We're young. Why not go like old men sitting here at home? Did Aubrey sing in your ears?" For some reason, the young man started to get angry. "Why immediately, Aubrey," she just said, "and I'm offering you—" She looked at him. "So go with Aubrey," he waved her away. "Beloved, if you're going to act like this, I'll just pack my things and leave you," the girl said. It wasn't the first night she smelled alcohol from him. But as long as he didn't do anything, she kept silent. "Okay, that's it. I'm sorry," he hugged her. So are you going to go?" she continued. "I'm serious. Go with your girlfriend. Have some fun." He had nothing against it. "What do you mean with a girlfriend?" Emma listened to them. "Mom, at least you stay out of it," he grimaced. "Fine," she teched and went to her room. Lately, Elizabeth began to notice that her mother-in-law had distanced herself from her as well. They didn't have the kind of communication they used to have. Tonight ended well. "Well, what does John say?" her friend asked her the next day. "Nothing, he said that we should go with you." Elizabeth did not deceive her because she really wanted to get away. "That's fine," she was glad. When Saturday came, the girls were at the club. Elizabeth was no longer a snotty girl. She had nothing to be embarrassed about, and she went straight to the middle of the room. Aubrey followed suit. The girls were having a blast. "Can I ask you out?" A young man approached Elizabeth at one point. "Of course, I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. You're pretty." "I've been watching you for a long time," Michael told her. "He came to the village on weekends to visit his mother." "Thank you." She was embarrassed. "Can I invite you back later?" He had agreed in advance for the next dance. Of course, today Elizabeth had a great day, and she did not want anything to spoil it. After the disco, Michael went to see her off. It was nice. For a long time, the girl had not felt so much male attention. "Bye." He looked at her near the gate, where Elizabeth lived. "Come on, next weekend we'll meet." She opened the gate, entered. "Where were you?" stood the mother-in-law, and looked with an unkind squint. "What an interrogation, John knows everything." She smiled at Emma. "Look at you, dressed up, put on makeup. I saw how Michael walked you home," said her mother-in-law angrily. "Today no one will spoil my mood." She went to the bedroom. From that day on, the woman did not let her daughter-in-law out of her sight. She saw her walking around the village in short skirts. Michael, who used to arrive on Saturday night and leave on Sunday morning, began to stay for longer periods of time. "John, why are you so late again?" she asked her husband when he stayed out late with friends again. "Elizabeth, don't bother," he asked her. "Okay." She folded her arms across her chest, and when her husband fell asleep, she would quietly leave the house again and go to the stables. Emma saw all this. She couldn't interfere. She was afraid of fighting with her son. She knew she wasn't running to the horses, but she kept quiet. The girl returned home when it was well past midnight. She quietly opened the doors to the house. On the threshold stood her mother-in-law. "Jesus, Emma," she clutched at her heart. "What? Are you scared?" she asked her. Unexpectedly, the girl said the truth. "The time will come, and John will know everything," she told her. "Find out what?" She couldn't understand why things had changed so much in this family. That's it. The woman was leaving her. Crazy house, Elizabeth entered the bedroom, lay in bed. Sleep did not come. She began to think that she and her husband needed a vacation. To go away, to divorce, to forget everything that had been recently. The next morning, when John and his mother came out to breakfast, they did not recognize Elizabeth. The girl was in a beautiful dress with light makeup. "Wow!" Her husband walked up to her and kissed her. "Trying hard?" She smiled. "Beautiful," he whispered in her ear. When he went outside, his wife hurried after him to talk. "John." She took him under her arm. Now a beautiful young couple was walking through the village. "What?" He liked walking like that. "Let's go somewhere and relax, at least in the city for the weekend," she asked him. "You know, I can't do it now. I'll soon start working in the field. I need everything to be in order," she believed him, because he spoke with regret. "I see," she said it in such a sad voice that John even stopped. "Look, why don't you go to your mom's?" he suggested to the girl. "Okay." She immediately perked up. "That's great. And we'll take a break from each other and divorce." He hugged her around the waist, and now they were walking like that. "Are you tired of me?" she asked. "Well, why do you take everything so literally?" Indignant husband. "All Elizabeth," we agreed. He kissed her right outside the post office building and went on. At work, too, everyone noticed that Elizabeth looked different today. Complimented her. Although today was Thursday, but Michael, for some reason, was in the village. He came to the post office with flowers. Colleagues even opened their mouths from such insolence. "Michael, I'm leaving tomorrow, so I won't go to the disco," she told him. "So that's who you're dressed up for," the boss told her. What nonsense. She left work early today. In the evening, they had a nice evening. Elizabeth cooked dinner, everyone ate and went out. As soon as John was asleep, Elizabeth went back to the stables to tell the horses that she would be gone for a few days. Emma was on guard. She had already been told what was in the post office today. She decided that when the girl left, she would be sure to talk to her son. In the morning, John saw his wife off, went to work, and she prepared to meet her most dear people. "Mommy," now Christopher was running towards her. "Hello, my darling." She picked up her son. How good it was now, Elizabeth. Without suspicion, late husband next to mom and son. "Well, how is life with you?" Jeannie asked. "Everything is fine." Elizabeth did not want to upset the woman. She still believed that everything will work out with John. And Emma, at that moment, was waiting for her son from work. "Aren't you going to have dinner?" she asked the young man when he returned. "Mom, how tired I am of all your suspicions in this talk." He waved her away. "Are you blind or deaf? Do not hear what they say in the village." "I tell you exactly," to Michael went to town, stood the mother over the ear of her son. "I know that Elizabeth is an honest and decent girl. She would not do such a thing. He could not change his mother's mind. I saw how this honest one twists her ass in front of everyone." The mother spoke almost with hatred about her daughter-in-law, with whom not so long ago she was so kindly communicating. "Listen, just because Elizabeth was here, I used to come home. And now," he stopped talking. The woman realized it was best to get behind her son now. She quieted down for a while, but she didn't abandon her task of tracking down her daughter-in-law. "Tell me why he does not believe me." She walks around, twisting her ass. She came to the neighbor with complaints. "Oh, don't get involved. It's a young thing. They'll sort it out themselves," she advised her. "I cannot, you know. He worked in the city. Everything was fine. No, met this one, brought and all, began to drink. Almost crying woman." "Well, I, of course, as a mother, you understand," silenced the neighbor, not knowing what else to say. "All right, I'll bring her out into the open. Tell me what she needs there, in this stable. Why not in the henhouse, nowhere else? Only goes there. And I'll tell you, because it's easier to hide there, both herself and her lover." Emma said, "When you catch her by the hand, then everyone will believe you." The neighbor shook her head. "Say, and why they have no children?" "Yes, because John does not sleep with her, So she went to the left, and Michael, the dandy, saw a pretty girl, and all the same, Emma sighed. "That's enough, go home. Take a sedative and wait for your sister-in-law," she told her. "Yeah, I'll go, it's late." The woman got up and left the neighbor's house. Strangely enough, but while Elizabeth was not in the village, Michael did not show up there, which made her mother-in-law think that they had gone somewhere together. Could she have deceived you like that? She pestered her son again. "Mom, leave me alone. I believe in love, Elizabeth." He could no longer tolerate all this talk. "All right." The woman tightened her lips. And Elizabeth enjoyed having her son with her. She practiced with him, drawing, playing, assembling a constructor. She associated it as if she were in the desert, and she was very thirsty, and now she was given a bucket of water, and she couldn't get drunk. "How he misses you," stood in the doorway, Ginny. "Mother, don't pour salt on my wound," her daughter told her. All silence. The woman understood how Elizabeth feels bad, even from these words. One day, the girl suggested that they all go to town together, to get some air, to go to the park, to go shopping. Christopher was glad of this turn. He could not wait for the day when they would go. "My darling, soon we will all live together. Then I will tell you everything and show you everything." She pressed her son to her. It was fun in town, especially for the boy. They stayed there all day and drove back in the evening. Ginny melted the stove and they cooked dinner. Then they talked for a long time. They had to put Christopher to bed. But when Elizabeth went to the room with him and lay down beside him, she fell asleep too. In the night, the girl awoke to some strange odor. Mom burning. She saw that from the kitchen she could already see the flames. She quickly sprang into action. From the room she was in, the girl could not go out. There was a lot of smoke. She fumbled for a small water bottle under the bed, wet her son's T-shirt, put it on his face, told him not to clean it up, then did the same thing herself. Oops. She was thrown a little away from the window when she threw the chair at him. By now the flames were already in this room as well. Elizabeth was saving her son, but all her thoughts were on her mom. She was in that room next to the kitchen. When the girl was outside, she could not cough. "Water, quick, careful." Heard her exclamations of neighbors who had already called the fire department, but they had not yet arrived, so people were trying to cope with their own forces. "Elizabeth, are you alive?" Someone ran up to them, but she couldn't see who it was. "Mom," she said, gasping for breath. Someone tried to break into the house, but it was impossible. Finally, a fire truck pulled up, and everyone seemed to exhale. But when everything was extinguished, Elizabeth learned that her mom had not managed to get out. She had died in the fire. No. Ooh. She fell to her knees in front of the house. It was a good thing that at that moment Christopher was led away by the neighbors. "Calm down," tried to lift her off the ground. "Go away, leave me alone." The girl was becoming hysterical. Hours later, Elizabeth was sitting in a neighbor's house, drinking a sedative. She was wrapped in a blanket and was just kind of in a trance. She mostly blamed herself for the death of her nearest and dearest. "Elizabeth, calm down," a neighbor was telling her. I can't. Why did it happen?" Now she spoke calmly, as if there were no emotions. "Listen, you had a choice. Who to save, the child or the mother? You made the right choice." She tried to somehow calm Elizabeth, but no one could comfort her now. She couldn't even call John because then the truth about Christopher would come out, and she wasn't ready for that yet. A few days later, the funeral was held. By that time, the girl had recovered a little from the state she was in during the first days. The neighbors helped with everything. After the cemetery, we went to the canteen, which was kindly provided by the administration. "Well, are we going home now?" asked Elizabeth, a neighbor. "Yes," she nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. She needed to be alone and think about everything. but it could not be done. There was always someone around. She decided to go to the city with her son for a few days. As she decided, so she did. She rented a room where they stayed. "My little one, come here," she called her son to her. "Where's Grandma?" he asked her. "My dear, she had gone to heaven." She did not know what to explain to the little boy. Where now is the one whom he loved, even, perhaps, more than Elizabeth herself. She had been up all night. Something had to be decided. She couldn't hide here all the time. If John did not call at first and did not disturb her, now literally every hour dialed. "Honey, I'll be there tomorrow morning," she said. "I'll meet you." He always did. "You know, I'm very depressed. I'll probably call a cab." She saddened him with this. "That's expensive," he wondered. "So, I'll be right there. I'll tell you everything. You'll understand me." She didn't tell him until the last thing that happened. "Okay, then I'll be at work, and by lunch I'll leave," he said to his wife. They agreed. Now, Elizabeth had calmed down a bit. She called a cab early in the morning when it was still dark. She put her son in and they drove off. The cab driver, when he heard the address, was surprised. "There are buses there every 3 hours," he told the girl. "And what? I can't hire a car." She didn't understand. "Your business?" he shrugged. They drove up to the village. Elizabeth hoped that the mother-in-law was still asleep. In her husband she did not doubt. "Don't go to the gate," she asked the driver. "Good." He drove a little farther. They got out of the car. Elizabeth paid. She took her son by the hand and led him to the stables. "Look at the horses, my darling." She showed him the animals. "Beautiful." Christopher smiled. "Will you stay here with them for a while?" she asked the boy. "Yes," he nodded. "Listen, it's a game of hide and seek. We'll hide from Grandma and she'll look for us," the mother explained to the child. But she couldn't, her voice breaking from tears. She led the boy to the very end, where there was a pile of straw. The girl spread a blanket there, made a hollow, and Christopher climbed in. Elizabeth hoped that they were up early, so the boy would get some sleep. "Remember one thing, you can't scream and you can't go out either." She put her finger to her lips. "Mommy, don't worry. I know how to play hide and seek." He put his arms around her neck. Though she was very worried, she got out of the stable and went into the house. "Who brought you here, Michael?" was standing arm in arm with her mother-in-law. "Emma, please don't start." She walked into the house. John was still asleep. She began to make tea for herself, not forgetting to pour some for her mother. "I heard a car drive up, but not to the gate," the woman kept muttering. "That's it. I'll talk about this only with my husband." She waved her away. "What do you want to talk to me about?" He left the room. "Beloved, hello." She came to him, hugged him, and burst into tears. "Elizabeth, what happened?" He knew there was something she wanted to tell him. The mother-in-law stood with a satisfied look. Perhaps she thought that the girl would now start talking about cheating, and that she was leaving. Then she would be right about everything in her son's eyes. "My mom died," she said through sobs. "What? Why didn't you call me? I would have come and helped, and you were alone for so long." He pressed her harder against him. "And maybe not alone," mother-in-law quietly muttered. "Mother," said John irritably when he heard this. At that moment, Elizabeth thought she would beg her husband to go back to town. She would have to tell him about Christopher and confess that she had been deceiving him for so long. If he wanted to leave, she wouldn't hold back. John sat down at the table. He ate breakfast, told the women not to fight, and went to work. The girl also went to the post office. She wanted to say that she couldn't work here anymore. "Elizabeth, well, at least a week to work. We have no one to replace you and on the nose of the pension," asked her boss. Well, she was very worried about her son. The girl was running around the village, as if terrified, when she came home, very tired, but she could not go to the stables. She knew that her mother-in-law was always watching her. Only after supper, When all had gone to bed, she waited until her husband was asleep and went quietly out of the room as before. "Christopher," she called out to him. "Mother and I hid myself so well that no one could find me," he told her. "Here, look what I brought you." She placed food in front of him for him to eat. "Thank you," he yawned. Elizabeth sat with the boy until it dawned. Then she left him there again and went into the house. Strangely enough, no one met her on the doorstep today. She walked unobstructed into the room, there pretending that she had just gotten up. "Ginny, what will I tell you?" Emma came running to her neighbor. "What happened again?" She was so freaked out. "My sister-in-law." She was in the stable all night before she got here. "I know that Michael brought her there, and she's been horsing around with him," she said. And that's when they saw Michael outside the window. "Look, maybe you're right. He wasn't there when Elizabeth left." Ginny was beginning to wonder now. "I'm telling you the same thing. But how can I tell John? They'll leave me here. He believes her, not me." Emma was almost crying. "Tell him so, or better, show him," the neighbor advised. "What do you mean?" Emma didn't understand. "Watch, eavesdrop, record it on your phone," Jeannie advised. In the evening, Emma waited for her sister-in-law to come out. She saw her, wanted to follow her, but as quietly as she could not do it. "Emma, is that you?" Elizabeth turned around. The woman had to lurk in the darkness and keep silent. Everyone could see that Michael had just settled into the village. The mother-in-law was already so angry she couldn't forgive some wench for cheating on her son right under his nose. On the third day, she was determined. Even if her daughter-in-law heard her, she would still do it and catch her red-handed. "Sonny, will you stay here a little longer?" I wanted to cry, but Elizabeth swallowed her tears and held on. "Of course, Mommy, I feel good here. It's warm, the horses are talking to me," he told her. "Yes, they are nice." She got up and went to one of them, and again until morning with the baby, and then to work. Elizabeth saw that her mother-in-law could no longer contain herself, and then this Michael came like a bath sheet. He came to the post office, gave flowers, said compliments. It was heard by everyone, and of course passed on to the mother-in-law. "Tell me, why are you bothering me?" she said angrily to him. The girl did not sleep for a day, managed to rest for a few hours, and again had to work or do something else. "Elizabeth, I can see that your husband, then with friends on vacation, then somewhere else disappears, is not home," Michael said to her. "What do you care?" She didn't understand. "I like you. I don't want you to be hurt," he answered. "You understand? It's a small village. Everyone talks about us. If before she didn't think about it when her mother-in-law talked about the stable, now she was afraid that everything would be revealed. Now what she was most afraid of was not that they would find the baby or anything, but that she had lied to her husband for so long. Well, please, can I at least come to visit? I left everything in the city. I came here on purpose. I don't need anything. I can't think about anything but you, the young man told her. Michael here. Let's go. If we part with her husband, then you will start courting. And now, while we are together, please do not meddle with me, she told him. But apparently the guy was not getting it. And he did not do as Elizabeth asked him. That day she came home, did everything right, made dinner. She could feel Emma's back watching her. What? She turned to her. What, cheating on my son? Huh? If she couldn't talk about it with him, she wasn't shy in front of her daughter-in-law. What makes you think I'm deceiving him? Elizabeth was tired of everything. Do you think I do not see that when my little boy falls asleep, you quietly leave the room and sneak into the stable? The woman made a look as if she had revealed a great secret. If you don't know anything, then keep quiet, Elizabeth told her angrily. She, too, had had enough of these antics. Oh, how you doubt, child, I know everything. And do not think that if I am many years old, then I am already very stupid, she said to her. At this point, Elizabeth was silent because she knew for sure that her mother-in-law thought one thing, but in reality everything was quite different. We will probably go to live in the city, Elizabeth told her at that moment. She will go away. She clung to the guy with her teeth, and he, the fool, hung his ears, believes everything she said, as if the woman was talking to herself. Please don't interfere with our family, Elizabeth asked her. At that moment, John returned from work. He saw that the women were here alone, but both were irritated. I don't understand why the world won't take you, he asked them. Ask your wife as soon as she started wandering around the village. The world didn't take us. Am I an enemy to my son? Emma began to hint to him. Mom, that's it. I don't want to hear it anymore. He was nervous again, and only now Elizabeth realized that it is not in their family problems, but in the family of her husband and his mother. She drives him to various conversations, and he could not believe her, and he could not take it calmly either. The girl stood up and held out her hand for him to talk in the room. Come on, let's have dinner and then go to bed, he told her. And that's all she wants, that you go to bed, gloated the mother-in-law. Mom, the son said to her rudely. The woman was silent. She was really afraid of losing him. They ate, then, as usual, went to their room, lay on the bed. Come to me. John put his hand under her head. John, you know I don't have time for this right now. I'm all worked up about the last events, and your mom is adding fuel to the fire, she told him. Yes, my mother can do it. If you knew what songs she sang to me while you were away, he complained to his wife. I have a rough idea, but trust me. She decided today that she wasn't going to hide anything from John, and she was going to bring Christopher into the house. She didn't care who said what or who did what. As she lay there thinking about it, she heard John snore. Beloved, are you asleep? She pushed him, but he didn't say a word in response. Elizabeth lay there for a couple more hours until it was dark and late. After that, she left the room and looked. The light was not on anywhere. She went into the kitchen as usual. Everything was already prepared for the evening trip to the stables, took the bag, and left the house. Emma wasn't so stupid today. She knew where her sister-in-law had gone, so she waited until the door had closed and already unobstructed just walked to it. When she got outside, she saw Elizabeth walking towards the stables, looking around. Now I'll prove it to everyone, the woman said to herself and followed her. She stopped at the door, waited until Elizabeth had gone all the way through, then went inside and hid. Hello, my love. She heard what Elizabeth began to say. My little one, tired, while waiting for Mommy, fell asleep. And she says she doesn't go to anyone. She doesn't talk to horses like that, Emma said to herself in a whisper. Look what I brought you here, but nothing. Sleep, sleep. I'll sit next to you, Pichu, continued to say daughter-in-law. How mother-in-law wanted to get out of her hiding place quickly, but she wanted to listen to the end of the matter. You do not get angry with me, do not take offense. Today I will tell John everything. Let him know that I have you, what he will think. Then think we part. So it is necessary, Elizabeth said in a calm voice. Oh, you got a nerve. Emma couldn't sit still any longer. I love you, my good man, kissed his mother. At this point, the mother-in-law could no longer contain herself. She stood up to her full height and walked down the aisle without embarrassing anyone. And what do you want to say that you do not meet anyone here? She began to say from afar to her daughter-in-law. Quiet. She saw her and heard her. Everything trembled inside, but she herself remained calm. Quiet, what quiet? Are you still going to bring your lovers here? Said the woman indignantly. Emma, please don't shout, the daughter-in-law said in a different tone. Oh, don't shout. She is not shy, not afraid, or what? Come here, Elizabeth asked her. Why, to look at your lovers. I don't want to, replied the woman. Please come here, Elizabeth spoke calmly. As proud as Emma was, she made her way over to where Elizabeth was sitting. When she got closer, she didn't even lower her eyes. "So," she asked, "didn't you see?" The daughter-in-law was silent, and the mother-in-law lowered her eyes at that moment and saw Christopher. "What?" She was confused. "What, do you think it's Michael?" Elizabeth asked her. "I don't understand anything." The mother-in-law was at a loss for words. "Go home, now he will wake up. I will tell you everything," Elizabeth asked her. The woman turned around. On cotton legs, she went to the house and could not understand anything. Christopher woke up 2 hours later. He saw his mom. He smiled. "Well, my dear, my grandmother found you," she said. "How can it be? I've been hiding here for so long. No one could find me," said the boy. "Let's get acquainted," she called him, gave him her hand, and they went out of the stable. As she led him into the house, the boy looked surprised at Emma, who was sitting at the table in the kitchen. "Hello," he said to her politely. "Come here." She beckoned him over to her. The boy came over. The grandmother leaned over. "Who are you?" she asked him. "I'm Christopher," he replied. "And who is this?" She looked at Elizabeth. "And this is my mother." He smiled and looked at her. "Elizabeth, explain what's going on." The woman looked up at her. "Maybe we should wait until John wakes up and then we can all talk together." She had nothing left to lose. Great. Now the girls started setting the table to feed the child. "Are you my grandmother?" Christopher asked Emma. "Well, apparently yes," she answered him. "Why did it take you so long to find me?" Still, Christopher thought they were playing a game. "Because I must not have looked hard enough," the woman replied. She raised her eyes, full of tears, to Elizabeth. "Don't," she told her. When John came out of the room in the morning, he was surprised to see a mother, a wife, and small child at the table. "I don't understand. What is this meeting?" He came and sat down there. "And we are all waiting for you for breakfast," Elizabeth told him and smiled. Then she went to her husband and began to tell him about her life with Austin, what he had done with her, how she had found out she was pregnant. Then she had lived with her mother, and most importantly, she told him about the fire that had happened when she left. "What a fool I am," Emma blamed herself. "Why do you talk about yourself like that?" Elizabeth looked at her. "You know what I thought of you more than others. It was I who spread gossip through the village." She confessed to Elizabeth now. "It's all over now. I hold no grudge against you," she answered. "Christopher, come here," she called him, and now she sat the boy on her lap and hugged him. "One grandmother left me and another came," he told her. "Yes, and it's true," the woman sobbed. John sat there, confusion in his eyes. He looked at Elizabeth and couldn't understand anything at all. "Elizabeth, we have never had secrets from each other. Why am I only now learning all this?" he asked her. "Do you remember when we were sitting with you and I asked about the children?" She reminded him of their conversation. "Of course, I remember everything we had together," he answered her. "You said then that there was nothing to breed poverty, and in general, against children and everything else," she said. "You fool. Come here." He drew her to him. "I was talking about our future children, not the ones you had. I wouldn't mind even if you had 10. He started kissing her. "My family, forgive me." Emma was ready to kneel, and especially you, Elizabeth. "A good girl came here, she saw it at once. And why did you start thinking nonsense? Everyone, now that everyone knows everything, we can just go on living as a family," Elizabeth said. The grandmother no longer heard her. She was all engrossed in her grandson. The woman had been telling her son for so long that she had long dreamed of becoming a grandmother. And now, even if indirectly, but he fulfilled her wish. "John, shall we talk privately?" his wife asked him. "Of course. But if you want to ask about truth or faith, I tell you right away that there is nothing of the sort." He immediately anticipated her question. "Shall we drive back to town?" she asked her husband. "Let's see how Mom behaves now, and then we'll decide. Usually there was always kindness and fun here. I do not know why she behaved like this now. The young man shrugged his shoulders. Christopher and I are going for a walk, Emma said. It's so early, Elizabeth wanted to stop them. It's okay, it's fine. Let him get used to it. He'll be going to school soon and he'll have to get up early. The new grandmother smiled. They walked out of the door, and John drew his wife to him, hugging her. You know what? He looked at her. No, she laughed, for the first time in a long time. Today looked at this boy, and, although still in shock from these stories, but I want us to have our own, he muttered. She wrapped her arms around his neck. Into the bedroom while no one's home, he asked her. Let's go, she followed him. Aren't you going to work? Elizabeth suddenly realized at the door. It's all right for the sake of the case, John winked at his wife. Now I recognize my John. They entered the room. Emma, who's that? The whole village was wondering where the boy had come from. Milken, can you imagine? It's such a miracle from us, walked on with her head held high. The woman. Nobody hid me, I hid myself, Christopher said stubbornly. Of course you did, you're a big boy, Grandma didn't argue with him. They walked almost all around the village, returning home when both their feet were buzzing so that they could hear it. Well, son, where did she take you? His mother asked him in a whisper, but so that the others could hear. To a viewing, he said. What? Elizabeth straightened up and laughed. It's all right, her mother-in-law came up to her. I know it was. Just someone didn't want to notice it, she hugged the woman. You're not leaving, are you? Emma looked at her favorite daughter-in-law, who had become a daughter this morning. Not until you start suspecting me of something again, Elizabeth said, smiling. God forbid, crossed grandmother. Where is Christopher? Elizabeth asked and became nervous. But when they turned around, they saw that the boy was curled up asleep. Quiet. Don't wake him up. Put her finger to her lips. She was ready to do anything to keep her grandson from being taken away from her. Good, you should sleep too, smiled Elizabeth. She felt tired herself. Okay, now, I'll just give my grandson a kiss, and then we'll go with him to Ginny's house in the evening. She invited him for pies, and I advise you to go out with John, her mother. In-law winked at her. You can be normal. Why did you pretend? The girl laughed for the second time that morning. Yes, and now I realize that even wise women can think different things. Elizabeth thought that the woman even blushed.